What's up, everybody? So as the title says, over the past 8 years, I've made over $1 million gambling as a hobby. Now, ever since I graduated from Harvard Law School, I've been working on various passion projects of mine, various businesses, but one of my primary hobbies on the side has always been gambling. And through doing this, I've unintentionally become an industry expert in gambling who's actually grinded out and made a ton of money doing it. So given that, I want to share everything I've learned with you all. And again, there's a few primary reasons for making this video. The first of which is that I want to help you win more gambling if you're already winning, or if you're losing at gambling, I want to help you lose less, or not play, or become a winner. One of the three. Because really, ultimately, gambling should be something that's profitable and you do for money, or something that you do for entertainment and you constrain your losses and you cap your losses, because those are the only two ways to do it successfully. Otherwise, it becomes a very destructive habit, and it's very hard to walk that line. So I want to take everything I've learned and help you gamble better, more effectively, more responsibly, or not gamble at all, honestly, because that's the answer for a lot of people. So I'm going to tell you my full gambling story over the past 8 years, and it's going to be completely transparent, complete with all the wins and losses I can remember, because I really want to bring transparency to this industry first and foremost. It's really in short supply, especially in the sports betting industry where I work. Everyone's pretending to be a winner. Everyone's pretending that you can get rich quick, and the fact is that's just not true. Very few people win, especially at gambling, and even at sports betting. 95% of people lose. It's very hard, it takes a lot of work, and the only way to win is to grind it out, to find value, to find good bets, and win long term. You have to be focused on the long term. If you're not focused on the long term, if you're trying to get short-term profits, you're always going to be disappointed, you're always going to be frustrated, because you can't control the short term. You can only control the long term. It's only probability, it's only getting the odds in your favor. So I want to share all the lessons I've learned, really help people, like I said, gamble better, more effectively, whether it's for profit or for fun, it doesn't matter, you can do it better, and I want to help. Alright, so in 2014, I was just getting started in my career. I had just graduated law school a couple years ago. I was working on a social network for politics that basically would help empower people, whatever side of the political line they were on, to start grassroots political movements. Conservative, liberal, didn't matter. Just help empower the people politically. The other thing I was doing was I was working on an education service for high school students primarily that would help them develop critical thinking skills, help them think through problems, because to me the biggest problem in education has always been that kids are not taught how to think, they're taught information, which is less important than teaching kids how to process information, how to analyze information, how to think through problems and everything they encounter in life, whether that's in their professional or personal or whatever lives, just thinking through information more effectively, because that's a really important skill, obviously, and I think the most important skill in education. But anyway, as I was doing this, I wanted some extra money, and I decided I always made extra money in law school gambling by playing poker, and I figured that in 2014 I'd start it up again. So I started playing online in New Jersey. I started hustling in underground poker games in Manhattan. Now, as you saw, that year I made around $70,000 gambling. And the biggest lesson I learned from this year was bankroll management. And as I said before, I alluded to this some, but I was trying to play the highest stakes possible out of ego and pride and, just wanting to feel like a big man, frankly, because I wanted to be on the guy on the site that was, betting thousands of dollars and winning every day, and I wanted to feel like the man. And if you're doing it for some psychological high, I can tell you you're always going to be disappointed gambling, and that's the thing I think I learned this year first and foremost, and that I've had to teach myself time and time again, because it's such a hard lesson to internalize. Because if you do gamble successfully, and if you are able to make profits, it's very hard not to feel some sense of validation about that. And when you're feeling that sense of validation, it's very hard to not continue chasing that sense of validation. And if you keep chasing that sense of validation, you both end up losing more than you should back, and you end up frustrated because you can't win all the time gambling. Even when you're gambling successfully, even when you have the odds in your favor, you're going to have losing days and losing weeks, even losing months. So you have to embrace the losses, you have to be willing to eat the losses, and you have to be able to tolerate the losses. So, that's I think the biggest lesson I learned in this first year was let everything go as much as you humanly possibly can. So when I was doing this video initially, somehow I skipped over 2015. So here we are back to 2015. And I want to say that it's funny because part of the reason I think I may have skipped over it is because I was looking at my winnings from each year, and in 2015 I won $69,000, and in 2014 I won $70,000. So again, it might look on their face like those years were the same, but 2015 was a really important year for me in that I learned a big lesson, which was a sort of proving it to yourself in gambling matters. It matters that you have confidence, and confidence will carry you through a lot of things. And in 2014, I was really starting to do it for the first time more systematically, and obviously I made 70K, and that was awesome. But to be able to do that essentially again in the next year and to win around the same was huge for me, because it gave me that confidence that, hey, I actually do really know what I'm doing here, and there's something to this, and this is a hobby that I can consistently profit at, versus maybe that year was a fluke or something like that. And that confidence will carry you in gambling. It's just so important because you can never judge yourself off short-term results. You're just not going to know how good you are based on the last day or the last week or the last month. You have to have some longevity. You have to have some faith in your process, and being able to prove it out over the course of years will give you that faith and that confidence you need to get through the hard times in gambling. So the lesson I learned in 2015 was to build that confidence and how important that confidence really is in gambling. So 2016 was really the year that things started to take off for me gambling. It was the first year that I ever made six figures gambling, and there hasn't been a year since that I haven't made six figures gambling. It's the year I really started to figure things out. So I can tell you that this year I made about 130K, and the biggest lesson that I learned this year was to stay humble. I started the year actually pretty broke. I was in between jobs. I had done a couple different things, and my startups weren't working as well as I wanted to, and I was really at an inflection point in my life. And I started to really refocus on the businesses that I cared about, and I started to play better consistently when I was gambling. And I cannot tell you how important it is to bring a consistent approach and play with that consistent approach every time that you play, because you're going to have ups and downs, and if you can maintain your discipline and you can maintain your winning approach no matter what happens, no matter if you really need the money or don't need the money, or you're winning or losing, or you're happy or sad, or something great's going on in your life or something terrible's going on in your life, the more you can just maintain that consistency and just focus on turning the odds in your favor time after time after time after time, the more you will win. And the more you lose focus on that, and the more you try to win, or you try to press, or you try to push things, the more you won't win. So please, just if you can learn a few things from me, and you're trying to gamble successfully, and you're trying to gamble for a profit, just focus on doing it systematically and divorce yourself from the short-term results, and play what you know is a winning strategy, and make sure you're getting the odds in your favor time and time again, because then you can actually have the long-term results you want. So 2017, I made almost exactly the same amount, around 130K, and even though it looks like consistency, I can tell you this year was a far cry from consistency. And the biggest thing I learned this year was that challenges in your personal life are going to affect you deeply when you're trying to gamble and win. And it sounds obvious, but it's so hard to execute when you're gambling and winning over and over again. It's so hard to divorce yourself from the results. And if you're having issues in your personal life, if you're emotional, I can tell you it's incredibly difficult. It becomes almost impossible. And whatever issues I had going on with ex-girlfriends or family or whatever, those would bleed into my play, and I couldn't play successfully when those things were happening, and I could have probably made a lot more this year if those things weren't happening, but luckily I was able to right the ship and stabilize things at certain times. But I can tell you that people ask me a lot, can you gamble, can you play poker when you're drunk, can you sports bet when you're drunk? Hi, no problem. But if you're emotional, you cannot successfully gamble basically at all, because you're going to you're going to try to make yourself feel better through your gambling results, and that is a recipe for disaster. So whenever possible, never do that. So if you're emotional, if you're feeling bad, then I would just say don't gamble at all, or if you have to, cut your unit size, bet less than you normally do. Just be as cognizant as you can, because it's just going to make things worse. And that's the last thing you need when you're feeling bad, is to lose money. It just makes things 10 times worse. I've done it way too many times to count, and I can tell you from experience, it sucks. So I would love to see you avoid that same trap. Now in 2018, a huge thing happened in New Jersey, and that was that online sports betting was legalized. The Supreme Court overturned a decision that basically had limited sports betting to, for all intents and purposes, Las Vegas. And now finally New Jersey could offer online sports betting in 2018. So I was already winning at poker, and I'd always loved betting at sports. I'd bet on the side with friends or bookies or whatever, but I had never done it that seriously because, I was always worried about the risk of some bookie running off with my winnings or whatever. And finally, I could bet in a legalized, regulated market, so that was huge. But starting off, I can say to you that when you're new at a game gambling, the biggest lesson I learned was that I didn't know as much as I thought about sports betting. When you're new at a game, whether it's poker or sports betting, you have to have humility. I loved sports growing up. I've always loved sports. It doesn't matter what it is. It's just a lot of fun to watch a game, especially if you can go in person. But I thought I was going to be elite at sports betting off the bat because, I made a few sports bets with my friends and won. And it's a lot harder than it looks. And that's true of winning at gambling in general. It's a great lesson to remember. And what I learned in this first year of sports betting is that you can't just be a casual fan or a casual observer and win at sports betting. It's not like that. It requires a rigorous, systematic discipline. So just know if you're not doing that technical analysis of markets and spreads and odds and teams, or if you're not doing fundamental analysis of players and matchups and situations and all that kind of stuff, it's going to be next to impossible to win. As a casual fan, just know it's really, really hard to win, and you probably won't. And that's how sports books get you, is they make you think that you can just watch football occasionally on a Sunday and then pop in and win a bet. And the fact is, sure, you can win a bet, but the bet you're placing is probably a losing bet because you probably don't have a full understanding of everything that's going on with a team, everything that's going on with the market. The thing is that, and it's a common phrase in sports betting, elite sports bettors bet numbers, they don't bet teams, because at a certain number, at a certain level of odds, any team can be profitable, right? If I give you 1 billion to 1 odds that a really bad team beats a really good team, you would take that, right? But if I give you 1 to 1 odds, meaning that you only get paid $1 for every dollar you risk, that a bad team beats a good team, obviously you wouldn't take that because the bad team is not going to beat the good team as much as the good team beats a bad team, right? So ultimately, just know, and I learned this lesson, it was very humbling at first because I thought I could just come in and crush sports betting, but any sort of gambling you're going to do successfully is going to take work, and you're not going to be good at it to start. So don't expect to come in and crush it off the bat because it's not realistic. So in 2019, I actually made a little less, even though I had my biggest win ever. I won over 100K in a poker tournament, but I only made 140K for the year that year, and that's because after I won that tournament, I was just firing away at higher stakes stuff and not winning. And again, the biggest lesson I learned from this year is that I think when you have a big win, the best thing to do is take a step back and act like it didn't happen for maybe 3 to 6 months, because after that big win, I felt compelled to play really, really high stakes. I went to Vegas, I was playing, huge tournaments, huge cash games, everything, and the variance in the short term, it was not in my favor. So after having the biggest win of my career in gambling, I didn't have the biggest year of my career. And that's because I, again, try to do too much after a big win. And that's going to be the tendency after a big win. You're going to try to do too much, or you're going to spend too much, to be honest. So again, if you have a huge win in gambling, my advice is to spend 6 months like it didn't happen and do the exact same thing for the next 6 months. If you can't do 6 months, do 3 months, because you'll be really happy you did. It's very hard to process winning 100K overnight. I couldn't do it at the time, to my own detriment. So if that ever happens to you, just take a step back, pause, live your life the exact same way you were going to the next day and for as long as you can. And then once you've really come to terms with the new financial reality you're in, then decide what you want to do with the money. Because that's gonna, otherwise you'll have a very strong tendency to lose a good portion of it back or try to do too much with it too fast. So in 2020, I was actually planning on maybe stopping gambling, and I can say that gambling is a very taxing, draining thing to do a lot of times, because as I said, there's just inevitable ups and downs, and it can take a lot out of you. So I was going to be sports betting casually and playing here and there. But then the pandemic happened, obviously, and online poker blew up in a way that it hadn't in many, many years. And all of a sudden the games were incredible. You could make a lot of money if you were a great poker player. And I was making money sports betting as well. So that year ended up being super lucrative for me. I ended up making another 180K gambling that year. And I can say the biggest lesson I learned this year is, again, in a different way, I wasn't trying to make anything happen. I just was letting the game come to me. And that's how I made that 180K that year. I went in that year thinking, I've made 6 figures the past few years gambling. This is going to be, that last year was my last year of doing that. That's not going to happen for me again. And then obviously the opportunity presented itself and I went for it. And that really epitomizes winning gambling, is that you have to wait for the right opportunities and be disciplined and press when the right opportunities come along, but you can't force it. You can never just make an opportunity happen. The opportunities are there or they aren't. And if they're there, you go for it. And if they're not, you let it go. And fortunately, they were there that year, and I was able to be very successful. So in the past couple of years, I've pushed myself over $1 million in profits gambling. Point being that, ultimately I thought that there would be this huge sense of accomplishment when I won over $1 million gambling. I could hang my hat on that. That could be something I could always say about my, gambling hobby, that, hey, at least I won $1 million gambling. That's something, right? But I can tell you this, that the money aspect of it, it's nice. It's nice to have the extra money. It's obviously incredibly helpful, but it's not going to validate you. It's not going to make you feel as good as you think. And I know a lot of people say this, they get super rich, and I'm not saying that I'm super rich, because I'm not. But as someone that's made a good amount of money, I can say that the amount in your bank account will never make you happy. And that's a really important lesson when you're gambling for profit or doing anything, frankly, is that money is obviously important, and I'm not going to discount it. Not having money really can make you unhappy. It can really make you stressed. I've been broke. I've been worried about paying my rent. I've been worried about paying for my meals. I've been in that situation. It's not fun. But the alternative of having money in itself, it doesn't make you happy. Having money just gives you the freedom to worry about and think about other more important things. So you're still going to have stresses. You're still going to have worries. You're still going to have things that you have to figure out. Life is not going to suddenly be easy because you make a bunch of money, whether that's in gambling or otherwise. And I've definitely learned that over the past couple years. And so if you're gambling for money, always remember that the most important things are outside of gambling and outside of that money. It's the friends you care about, your family you care about, your partner that you care about, your kids, whatever it is, your dog, the world at large, your passions, the things that move you, the things that make you get out of bed in the morning. Those are the most important things in the world. So don't lose sight of that don't get wrapped up in the ups and downs, and don't try to validate yourself through the amount of money you're making gambling, because to be quite honest, it'll always leave you feeling unfulfilled. And the most fulfillment I get is not from making money gambling. It's from helping people or being with people I love or doing things that I care about, that I think matter. That's really what I want to do. That's really why I made these videos, and that's really why I'm starting this YouTube channel, is that I really truly believe that I can help people, not only in gambling, but in a lot of ways in life through a lot of the things that I've learned along the way. So I want to start with gambling and start helping you become a better gambler or a more successful gambler, or just to stop gambling if you're losing and you can't win and you can't focus on those games that you can actually win in. So just wanted to share that message and share my story, and I'm really looking forward to sharing more helpful tips and tricks in gambling and beyond. So again, my name is Brian, and really looking forward to getting to know all of you. Take care.